based in San Francisco Bay Area, and she is the author of the best-selling career guide, Work with Passion, How to Do What You Want for a Living. She comes to us with her new book, Work with Passion in Midlife and Beyond. Reach your full potential and make the money you need. She will invite us to ask questions about your career concerns and then respond on the spot using intuition and insight. Wow. So be careful. No. She will work with individuals to show how to find the right niche in work and how to be happy and productive. So, without any further ado, speaker Nancy Anderson.
Thank you very much. If you don't mind, I would prefer not to get up on the stage. I'll get so enthusiastic, I'll step off, and that'll be the end of the presentation. What a wonderful group that you have. Thank you so much for having me. I noticed when I was listening to everybody that you're all in varying stages, which is what I love, because the one thing about passion is that you never know when it's going to show up. Sometimes it's early in life, like the question that, Patrick, you had everybody ask, what were you thinking about when you were 18? There are little glimmers, there are clues at that age, but probably all of you have noticed that your life is developmental. You have different stages of your life. When you're in the 17, 18, and 19-year-old stage of life, that's when you really start the experimenting, and you're looking out and you're going to try a lot of different things. It's really not the time to focus. When the time to focus is midlife. And that's the reason why I wrote the second book, Work with Passion in Midlife and Beyond, because I noticed working with my clients that when they got to a certain age, there was this tremendous upheaval happening in the inner part of them, which they weren't able to understand. They just thought, well, something's wrong with me. I'm having the midlife crisis or whatever. And it's not really that. What happens to us when we hit about 40, 41, 42, right in there, actually it starts about 38. The first glimmerings of feeling restless, like, is this it? Why am I here? What the heck did I do that for? The kind of questions that you asked yourself when you thought what was making you happy just doesn't make you happy anymore. Now, happiness is one of those achievements, that we're all after. But I think the definition of happiness that I like the best were two men, one of them was Rodin, the sculptor, who said man will never be happy until he has the soul of an artist. By that, when he takes pleasure in his job. And the second, Aristotle, said that happiness was the full exercise of your natural talents on the path of excellence. I'm paraphrasing. So the full exercise of your talents, how could you possibly do that when you're 18? Or 25? Or 35? Because you are still developing and growing, and a lot of people expect children, and this is what I hear a lot, and I don't work with young people that much. Usually 28 is about the youngest age that I will work with, because they just simply haven't lived long enough. They don't know enough. And so if you try to force passion, or if you try to force achievement, or if you try to force fulfillment at too early an age, that wreaks havoc on the psyche. However, once you get to about 40, 41, 42, if you are not making that shift in values to look inside of you to find what will bring you fulfillment, what will be the full exercise of your natural gifts, you will have a very psychic disturbance, what Carl Jung wrote about. And all of his patients were older. And he said what he noticed about all of them was the ones that were coming to see him, they were not making the libidinal shift to refocusing libidinal energy into activities that were creative. In other words, they were still trying to live as though they were in the first stage of life, where the libido is out there. You're going and you're trying this, you're having sex, you're having partners, you're changing partners, you're all over the place, which is exactly what you're supposed to do. When I was on the radio one time, a young man called in and he said, well, I'm graduating from college and I really would like to just go around the world, and my parents want me to get a job. I said, well, your parents may be mad at me, but I think you should go around the world. The last thing you should do is to go from one structure to another structure. What you need is unstructured time, and that is the seedbed of creativity, is unstructured time, where you're spontaneous, you don't know what's going to happen. So I said, if you are going to go traveling, go where you've never been before, like Star Trek. And so when we got off the air, the interviewer, who had been on the radio quite some time, he says, it's amazing you told him that, because that's exactly what I did. Invariably, when I'm talking to somebody, I notice the conversation shifts around to I very quickly, because we're all most interested in ourselves. And I think what I'd like to convey to you today are some clues, some tips that will help you to get more in touch with who you really are, your authentic self, which, by the way, does not even start to emerge until you're midlife. So don't even try to find it when you're younger. Isn't that great? See what you have ahead of you? My younger clients get really mad at me. They say, well, you mean I have to wait? They want it right now. Authenticity, by that I mean when you are who you really are, underneath the layers of family and cultural conditioning. And it's no accident that I have my clients start with writing an autobiography that begins with their grandparents. Because when I was going to UCR, my main interest is writing and literature, and I thought, all my professors thought I was going to write psychological novels, and they were very disappointed with me when I wrote a how-to book. Well, Nancy, I didn't think that was the kind of book you were going to write. You know how snobbish, polysyllabic professors can be. I said, well, I didn't know that's what I was going to write either. It just happened. And that's, again, another clue to the passion. It's what you don't really plan, but it just starts to push its way through, and it makes you do it even if you don't want to do it. See, that's authenticity. What you have in your mind as your agenda, okay, this is what I'm going to do and this is what I'm going to be, if you're not open to what the authentic self really wants to do, you see, that's what causes the midlife crisis. That's what causes the feeling of alienation. Because basically you're at war with who you really are. And see, my values were very intellectual. That I thought, oh, well, I'll just think my way through life. Yeah, right. Well, that also will cause a very interesting nervous breakdown, which many people have, because they think they can think their way through life, they think your way through passion. You can't. You have to feel your way to passion. So to become adept at feelings, that's really why I think that I was led into the business that I wound up doing, because it's not what I would have chosen consciously. I mean, I'm sitting there on the 40th floor of the Pyramid Building talking to a guy who used to be in charge of the entire Pacific Basin for a large major bank. And he's telling me how he's going to jump off the Golden Gate Bridge. And I'm thinking, now how did I wind up here? I don't know what to say to this man. And so what I did was I just pulled on what I knew from raising my kids. I calmed him down. I said, well, I don't think that's a very good idea, Bill. And he said, well, then I'm going to sue the bank. They should never have fired me. This is a very proud man. For 25 years, his whole identity had been tied up in this bank, and he'd had all the prestige, and he knew everybody in San Francisco, Patrick. I mean, he knew the Giannini. So, it wasn't like he needed me to give him contacts. But what did he get from me, and what I learned as a result of working with him and other clients, was emotional support. Somebody who could be there even when it looked like it was never going to turn out. Where did that come from? I don't know where that came from inside of me. But that, again, is where the authentic self is going to come out and come forward when you're faced with a crisis. And if I had put myself in that place consciously, see, I would never have done it because I didn't think I could do it. But I had just agreed to help this man I knew to start this business called career counseling in 1976, which I'd never heard of. Nobody had ever heard of then. And then I was going to go on and do what I wanted to do, which was go to law school and write about the law. And then I would keep myself way away from feelings. I would just think, and I would be very detached and very distant. So the passion is going to take you into territory that terrifies you. It's the last thing. It's like love. You know how love is so terrifying? You know personally, right? Yeah, the drive-in movie. Well, see, remember I used the word libido earlier. In the first half of life, the libidinal energy is directed into sex. When Work with Passion was first being considered for publication, was a co-publisher on the East Coast, and he told my publisher at that time he was very interested in the book when he heard the title because they publish erotica. I said, well, did you tell him it was not erotica? He says, well, Herman, he just likes sex, anything with passion in it. And, in a way he was right, because working with passion, you do connect with the libidinal energy, but you connect with it in a way that's not physical sex, but it is the same high, and that lasts and lasts and lasts, so that you don't need another person. If you're really connected in the second half of life with a libidinal flow of energy, which means redirecting it into spiritual goals. And what are spiritual goals? Goals that have meaning to you. And only you. You can't start with looking out there to find, okay, well, that has meaning, and I'm going to go do it. Like the latest, hottest trends in business, you see those articles. Well, I'm going to do one of those, or I'm going to get in one of those businesses. And that's the opposite of passion. Passion is something that comes from deep inside of you. It's always been there since you were very small. But it takes time and it takes history. I was talking to the women at my table where I said, it's interesting because listening to everybody's stories, there were little glimmers of what they were going to do when they got older. But it takes time and it takes history to intersect with a human being and the development. Where is that going to flower, and when is that going to flower? And right now, the reason why this is such a wonderful time, even though the economy may seem like it's really the blockage, it isn't. Because in 1976, when I got started, that was a pretty bad recession. And I was glad I didn't know there was a recession going on, because then I wouldn't have done it. So ignorance is bliss. So, the economy will go up and down, but passion lasts forever. And if you understand that, you won't be so concerned about what's going on in the outside world, but you look and you're concerned what's going on in your inside world. Because if you can tune in to the authentic self, you are right in tune with your historical moment in business. It's just uncanny the way this happens. I've seen it over and over, where people come up with what they want to do, and it's exactly what the marketplace needs. But it would not have been successful 5-10 years earlier. Because it's not just them that's developing. The world is developing too in terms of its needs. So there's this constant interplay. Like my work, when I started, there were very few women that came up the express elevator to the 40th floor of the Pyramid Building in 1976. And, I just started off as the office assistant. I was just going to help him get the thing up and running, and then a year, I said, okay. He asked me if I'd help him because he knew I'd had businesses and I was pretty talented. So that's a good way to start, by the way, where the stakes are very low. Because, you don't really have to do anything except just be yourself. So what happened was that as the clients were coming in for their appointment with the career counselor, I was out in front, and I'd get them coffee, and they'd start talking to me about their problems. And so I said to my partner one night, I said, these people that they're not ready to go out there and talk to people. The career counselor you hired doesn't know what he's doing. I said, I'm really concerned about them, because I'd been a journalist. I know how you go out and meet people, and they're not ready. They don't know, so I don't know what he's doing back there when they go in there. So he said, okay, why don't you do it? And I said, no, wait a minute, I'm not a counselor. He said, sure you are. Everybody's always talking to you about their problems. And I thought, yeah, including him. So I thought, well, you know what? I know more than the guy he hired. That's all I needed. And I said, okay, well, I'll do it for a while. And why? Because I was really concerned about the clients. They had paid money. They weren't getting the service that they'd paid for. And that's really the reason why I did it, because it wasn't anything other than that. It certainly wasn't money. So anyway, one week they came in and they saw me as the office manager assistant. And the next week they came in and I said, well, I'm going to be your counselor. And the man I was telling you about earlier, the one that was going to jump off the bridge, he sat there and he looked at me and he had this immaculate suit on.